So let's taste some Crown Royal. I stopped myself at 5. I was tempted to throw Seagram's VO in there, but we'll catch that one on another video. Crown Royal makes a huge diversity of whiskeys, as I said, and so I want to kind of go through a bunch of them. Since there's 5, I won't linger too long to not keep you, but I wanted to start with whiskey I think is quite underrated, and I'll end up talking about quite a bit as a result. It's the Crown Royal Limited Edition. They stuck a 10-year-old age statement on it in the last couple of years. There didn't used to be an age statement. The whiskey's tastes the same. So I think it was always sitting around there. It has a lot of batch-based whiskey in it, which I really like. I talked about that in my last video from Crown Royal. But a lighter whiskey, it's 40%, relatively cheap, $30, $35, I think. So kind of, not the lower end, but towards the lower end of the Crown Royal offerings. So if we smell it, it's pretty light-bodied, very creamy. You get a really, really nice kind of light, slightly sweet, slightly spicy, kind of luscious whiskey that isn't very full-bodied. So it's it's on the lighter, subtle side. And if you taste it, very pleasant. It starts out kind of sweet, and then you have some dried fruit building. You get some oak notes coming in. You get some nice corn notes coming in. Towards the end, you get some fruity, spicy rye coming in. If you're familiar with, the base spirits at Crown Royal, you taste a lot of them in here, and they work really, really well. A bit of banana cream pie as well. The finish is light and quite pleasant, slightly confectionery, a little bit of oak, a little bit of dried fruit. So all that on a single sip. It's a nice whiskey. It's a really nice, light, subtle, complex whiskey. If we look as well, I've said that Crown Royal's really good blenders. Sorry, they are really good blenders. A few years ago, they released a wine barrel finish. Wine barrels are, in my opinion, often dangerous with whiskey. They really pulled this one off. So it was released, it was, I believe, 40.5% alcohol. 40.5% alcohol. And if you nose it, there's a lot going on. It's a lot bigger than the previous one, but it's a great example of sort of a contemporary blend in terms of being a bit fuller bodied. You get really nice sort of French oak notes. You get spice, oak. You get really nice fruitiness. You get some sort of licorice spice coming out. Baking spice too. Quite nice, bit of vanilla. And when you taste it, so it's fuller body than the previous one. The last one was more on sort of creamy vanilla light. This is more on, bigger on the fruit. There's the spice here is very different. It doesn't play sort of such a background role like on the previous one. This one, it's much more integrated. It's very rich. The finish has quite a bit of dried and fresh fruit in it. Spice and oak. Very nice. This is one where you can spend a lot of time nosing it, tasting it. It's very balanced. It's very complex. Lots going on. So let's keep moving. These are all very different, so hopefully you get a picture of that as we taste. So this now is another of the Noble Collection, which is an annual limited release. This was from a few years ago. It was a 13-year-old blender's mash, 45%. So this, again, if you've seen my previous video, This is made in the same style as a bourbon. So a high rye bourbon of about 30% rye. So I guess 64% corn, 31.5% rye, 4.5% malted barley, mashed, fermented together, put through distill once, put into new oak, and 13 years later you get this. So it's very nice, very spicy, very oaky, a really, really nice corn character coming out. So it really is reminiscent of a nice, complex high rye bourbon. And if you taste it, you get the same. You get a nice bit of earthiness. It's fairly herbal. You get kind of sweet corn and oak. Just really nice. It's creamy as well. A lot of Crown Royal whiskeys are creamy. And the finish, nice dried fruit, nice oak, nice spice. Really, really nice. It's not as heavy or rich as some bourbon, so in that sense it's a bit different, but it has a lot of the same characteristics. If we keep moving along, so Blender Select. This is a whiskey which is bottling of the coffee rye, and I believe it's about 7 to 9 years old. So it's, more or less this whiskey, the blender's mash, but once it's gone through the still once, it then goes through a coffee still. And there's really no whiskey like this. There's also hand-selected barrels, which you can get in some parts of the States, which is this, but at sort of more than 50%, I think 51.5% alcohol. This is 45%. But if you smell it, so it smells like you've walked into a candy shop. It's so confectionery, and you get this big hit of like banana cream pie, which doesn't sound very appealing just listening to the tasting notes. When you smell it here, it works. It's so bright, and what's really awesome about that is the oak is there very lightly, and it feeds into the confectionery character just beautifully, and the corn is so creamy and it's so rich in this whiskey. If you taste it, there's so much depth. It's really complex. It's big. It's not harsh at all, so it's not a particularly spicy whiskey either. The oak supports it really beautifully. It just coats your mouth, and the finish just goes on with some more of those confectionery notes, a bit more of the banana. It's beautiful. It's a really good whiskey. If you haven't tried it, you should try it. Some people, I think, could find the confectionery character too much. If you ever have this one blind in flights, and this was kind of not my first exposure to it, but my first, I guess, glimpse into how good it was. It's just stunning, because it's not only is it big enough to stand up to the other whiskeys in the flight, but it's so complex and it's so interesting. It outshines so many Canadian whiskeys. So highly recommend it. It's so different than the rest that we've tasted, and a whiskey that I love to have on hand all the time. Finally, Northern Harvest Rye. You'll note my bottle has a cap that I reused from a different Crown Royal, but Crown Royal Northern Harvest Rye. I love this whiskey. It's kind of my standard. If I want a Canadian whiskey, this is the one I gravitate to. It's not too expensive, and really, really complex. There's a lot going on. If you smell it, I often get a sense of dried apricots that have almost been charred. If you've ever had food that cooks dried apricots that way and kind of stews them that way, it's just massive on spice, massive on fruit. Floral characters there too. There's so much complexity, and it's so big. And on the palate, again, I find the dried apricot pervasive, but it's really almost savory, and it plays really nicely with the spice. Not only baking spice, you also get a bit of licorice. There's sweet oak in it as well. You get other dried fruit like prune, and it's, you know, at times it's even just maybe edging a bit onto jammy notes, and then the finish is spicy, lightly tannic. Lots of great tasting notes for this online. I've certainly spent my time with this whiskey, and I absolutely love it. So, 5 Crown Royal whiskeys, super diverse, really, really tasty. So, explore Crown Royal, it really is worth it.